Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unmasked, a Beyond Worthy podcast. My name is Rachel Peck. As always, I just want to direct you to the present moment and just notice wherever you are, your surroundings, your breath, what you smell. The present moment is your gift, so just take a second to pause. And with that, Laura Munson is my wonderful guest today, who is a New York Times, USA Today, and international best-selling author of the novel Willow's Grove, the memoir This Is Not the Story You Think It Is, and the self-help book The Wild Why, a Maria Shriver Sunday paper feature. She has been published in 9 countries and has been featured in Vanity Fair, Elle, Redbook, Time, Newsweek, Washington Post, Publishers Weekly, and published in the New York Times Modern Love column, the New York Times Magazine Lives column, O Magazine, Maria Shriver's Sunday paper, The Sun, and many others. Laura is the founder of the acclaimed Haven Writing Retreats, which we will speak about. She speaks at women's conferences and literary events and has appeared on Good Morning America, The Early Show, NPR, and media outlets across the globe. She lives in Montana, and the 3 words that Laura would use to describe herself are wonder, self-expression, and truth. Laura, welcome to Unmasked.
Oh, Rachel, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the beautiful introduction and for giving us a chance to be present. That's one of the things we often forget. And it has a lot to do with the theme of my most recent book, The Wild Why, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So thank you for directing us all to this present moment, wherever you all are.
Absolutely. We should start by saying how we know each other, or how we don't know each other fully yet. I was gifted The Wild Why, your book, for my birthday in May. I've gotten most of the way through, 100 pages left. It's been incredible. My highlighter has been active. My dad gifted it to me. And then shortly after that, I got a text from my mom that she had spoken to you because you guys are all connected, which you're going to have to share more about. But I was just so excited because they sent me your number and I jumped on this opportunity. So if you wanted to give a little bit more of the backstory, please do.
It brings me great joy to fill in the blanks here. So I realize that most of you probably will be listening to this versus seeing it. But if you were in my studio with me today, probably about 6 different works of art by our dear Rachel Peck's grandmother, Fay Peck, who is a huge part of my childhood in that I grew up in a suburb of Chicago. There was a lot of tennis and golf. I was an artsy girl, much like Rachel's aunt Adair, who's an amazing artist as well as her mother. And so I would do anything when I was a kid. When the Pecks had a party, it was always outside. It was summertime. It was so much fun. Her grandmother, Fay Peck, did these amazing oils. She hung them outside because she painted them outside. She was a plein air painter. And then I would just like sneak into her studio with Rachel's aunt Adair, the artist, and just bask in the glory of an artist studio. So it's perfect, full circle, that here we are in my studio full of Fay Pecks. There's just a lot of family love here. And here we are today. And I don't think we've ever met. I've been in your house in Bozeman, but I don't think, maybe unless you were a little girl.
No, I actually was saying to Abu, who is helping me with all the tech, he's amazing, that you're my first ever guest, actually, that I haven't known in advance to an episode. And to be honest, I sometimes am really nervous when I come to an episode. And today I just felt so excited. And I think part of the reason is probably because of just the intertwining that we have with my family and my parents and your guys' friendship. And also having read your book, I felt so much comfort and felt like I could know you through the pages. You made me feel comfortable just in your writing, which I'm excited to talk more about as well.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you. That really hits home because, as a writer, and we'll talk all about my art form, but as a writer, you never really know who's listening, who's reading. Even when you look at art, if you're in a gallery, the artist can see people reacting to the painting. But with writing, you just never know where it lands. So I thank you for sharing that with me.
Oh, that's so true. Everyone's just in the abyss in their quiet rooms, reading their book and smiling and crying, all the things, and you've no idea. I'm glad that I got the chance to share that with you. My first question that I want to ask you, because it rung so true to a lot of what I've been trying to build in this podcast community, is the idea that we're so much more than what we do for work, what we study, all the things related to achievement and labels. And you mentioned that one of your least favorite questions in the book is when someone walks up to you at a party, per se, and says, "What do you do?" And your question instead is, "What do you like to do?" So I want to turn the question to you and ask you to tell us what you like to do.
Oh, thank you. What a nice invitation. Well, I want to pause my answer for a second and talk about why I asked that question. Because as you find in this book, The Wild Why Stories and Teachings to Uncover Your Wonder, I had a very strong addiction to ambition for a long time. And a lot of that came from how I grew up. I was very privileged, white privilege, went to prep school, stuff I don't like talking about in Montana. The list goes on. But stereotypically on the page, I was built for whatever success is by society's constructs. And at a certain point, I thought, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to go be an artist. And again, your grandmother was an influence in this way. She did it her own way. And they spent a lot of time out west. I spent time out west. I was lucky enough to go to a great camp, Chile, Colorado camps, and we lived in covered wagons for the summer. It was so cool. I think that's in part why I live here in Montana. And so when I moved out here, I realized that so many people had moved here because they wanted to be in the West and they wanted to do the things they loved to do. And in many cases, they were leaving something that they were supposed to do, but instead wanted to recreate themselves. And so I left the world of people who they're now all retired and, they have several homes. And I've just been this sort of artist out here in Montana for 30 plus years. But so many of the people, when I would go home or to different places, suburbs of Boston, Chicago, New York City, where my friends were doing what they were supposed to be doing, again, by society's constructs in that realm, they kind of didn't know what to do with me because I was this wild card that came out to Montana, which they still say, "How's life in Wyoming?" I'm actually like a 20-hour drive north in Northwest Montana. And they're like, "Oh, same thing, one of those big square states out there." And I love my friends and I'm not dissing them at all. I'm just saying when I got here, I fit in because people were recreating their lives and I was too. And so I would say to people here, I mean, nobody asked me here when I moved. So what do you do? Meaning, what do you do for work? It was, what do you like to do? So that I didn't create that. That was taught to me by the people who live here. And not everybody's just running around mountain biking and kayaking and climbing mountains and river rafting and fishing all the time. Obviously, people have to work and make an honest wage here. And most of the people who live here year round are those people. But still, I noticed when I moved here that people would work 3 jobs at minimum wage or whatever it took so that they could do what they wanted to do. Even if they didn't love their job, it was fine because they got to ski. I live in Whitefish, Montana. We're near Glacier National Park. And so I took that back to my different places that I'd lived with my friends from childhood and into high school and college. What do you like to do? And at first, they were so conditioned to this "what do you do" question, and their eyes would sort of fade, kind of darken, and they'd maybe even look to the left and the right or to the sky, and they'd say, "Oh, I manage a hedge fund," or whatever job they had. But there wasn't a lot of light in their eyes necessarily. And when they registered that I was saying, "What do you like to do?" their eyes would come alive. They'd almost interrupt themselves. "Wait, what do I like to do? Oh, I like to kayak. I like to ride horses. I like to walk around in the woods. I like to ski." I thought, wow, I've chosen a life that, even though it's much more challenging recreating yourself, especially as an artist, I chose a life that I like. And I'm proud of that. And I've modeled that to my children. So that is my long-winded answer to the question you didn't ask. And I will now answer the question. But I'm proud of that because I think that for anyone out there listening, try it on for size, especially when you walk into a party and you don't know people and you're just, trying to get to know people and connect. Ask, what do you like to do? And see what happens. It's so much more fun, I think, than what do you do? Hopefully they're one and the same. Okay, what do I like to do? I like to do all the things I just said that I like to walk around in the woods. I love foraging for mushrooms. We have beautiful morels up here, some chanterelles. I love to ride horses and not in a formal way. I just like to hop on a horse and head for the hills. That's something I've loved to do all my life. I love to hang out with my dogs. I love Glacier National Park. I mean, to be able to live near such a beautiful place, I go there as much as I can. And we're so lucky because Logan Pass is closed most of the year. But during some times of the year, you can ride your bike up that road. And these days, for me, it's an e-bike. Sorry, it's cheating, I know. But like to have that road, the Going to the Sun road to yourself on a
Mhm.
Monday afternoon, I mean, it's so those are some of the, and I love to, I mean, obviously, I love to read. And the thing I probably love to do the most outside of mother my children, who are now adults, and I have a new grandson, is write. That is my passion. I have every journal back to fourth grade in a closet over on the other side of the room. And that is something that has been my way to breathe all my life.
Thank you for sharing all that. And I'm glad that you answered an unasked question because it was beautiful and gave a lot of context. And I feel so grateful to have grown up in Montana where you can do so many of the nature oriented things that you mentioned because that's a grounding force for me where I find peace, spirituality, safety, just being in trees, fresh air, near water, on mountaintops. Going back to the question of what do you do, living in New York City, which is where I am currently, that's huge because everyone talks about what they do. And I'm going to use that challenge and definitely continue to go around asking people what they like to do. One question I've actually done a lot walking around the city is asking people how they would describe themselves if they couldn't tell me what they do for work, what they study, who their parents are, how much money they make. And that's been really enlightening because a lot of people don't know and they're stumped.
Oh, yes. You know, while we're on this subject, because I think it's pretty rare, I lived in New York City for a little while, a long time ago, and Boston, Chicago, London, Seattle back in the 90s before it was, I mean, it was like grunge and it was Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and that was a whole lot of fun to live there then. But one of the things that I've learned, and it's in my novel that's published called Willis Grove, one of the characters who lives outside of New York City in the suburbs, she comes out to Montana and she says to Willa, I love who I've been out here in nature. And Willa says to Jane, but Jane, you are nature. You are nature in Midtown Manhattan. You are nature in an elevator in Midtown Manhattan. You are nature wherever you go. So, this phrase, I love who I am out in nature, I invite people to turn it around and reframe it a bit because you are nature. But I love how you said it, the way you feel around trees, the way you feel, I mean, for me, on the shores of a mountain lake, the way you feel when you hear a loon fly over in an early summer morning moment. We are nature. And I realize that it doesn't feel like we're nature in a subway in New York City, but we are.
That's
So
an incredible
go
perspective.
sit on a park bench in Central Park and remember you are nature, and then bring what you have with you to the subway and see if you can feel that you still are nature.
Thank you for that. So well said. It's a good reminder when nature isn't physically present in all aspects of life. The wild why. I would love to ask you if someone was considering reading this book in particular of yours, what is the main thing that you hope that they would gain from the pages and the messages in Wild Why?
This book took me 10 years to write. If there are writers out there in this audience, not everybody needs 10 years to write a book. It takes me a long time, and it's also because I'm usually writing a couple other books at the same time. My love is fiction. I've written, I think, 23 unpublished novels, many of them exercises in learning. I've got about eight that I think are good, and one is published, working on a new one. So The Wild Why was a big departure for me because while I've written a bestseller in the memoir field, Life According to Me, and then another bestseller in the novel genre, which is my favorite. To me, fiction is like distilled reality, like realer than real. I'd never really written or read a self-help book. But because I'm now a teacher and lead writing retreats, I've learned a lot about what gets in the way of our self-expression. And I think if there's one message I want people to glean from this book, it has to do with your self-expression and getting past what so many people believe as adults, that they don't have a voice, that they're stuck in their self-expression, that somebody already expressed themselves better than they ever could. They don't have letters after their name in the field of self-expression that interests them, and then they stop. And I was walking around in the woods one day. So I'm a storyteller. So you ask me a question, I'll probably give you context. That's kind of the way I roll. I was walking around the woods one day in Montana, as one does. And I thought, I keep hearing these refusals, I call them, from people. The ones I just said, I'm stuck, I don't have a voice, etc. I'm not creative. That's the one that breaks my heart. And I do a lot of speaking. And so I hear a lot of people talk about their own experience of self-expression. And those are like the buzz phrases that people have believed. I don't have a voice. I'm not creative. And so I thought, I think maybe creativity scares people. I think it's a big word. I think that when we're young in traditional education in this country, we get slotted. You're a jock, you're a brain, you're artsy, you're pretty, you're a nerd, you're whatever it is. And that's such a disservice. Not all schools, but traditional education, those were the messages that we got. So then the jocks walk away thinking, I'm not smart and I'm not creative. And the brains walk away thinking, I'm smart, but I'm not a jock or I'm not artsy. And then it's the artsy people that walk away with, I'm creative. But then we're artsy, so the world doesn't necessarily reward us for these things. And so I thought, sitting on that stump, I think the word creativity scares people. So what's behind creativity? And that's when I thought about wonder. And then I thought, well, that's a pretty big concept too. What is wonder really? And then sitting on that stump, I thought, well, I think it's curiosity. I wonder what makes the sky blue. But I believe it's awe that we need to step into more than our curiosity. And I think our society, in the United States at least, is very heavy on curiosity. Hey, Google, what makes a rainbow? But now what are we doing? Are we looking at the rainbow? No, we're looking at our screen. So, what if wonder is curiosity and awe put together? Awe requires stopping or just taking pause, like the way that you began this podcast. And it is not a silly, frilly idea. I've been 10 weeks across this country and all over the place with this book for the last year and a half. And I have found in this worried world that people are so hungry for their wonder, specifically their awe. They're stopping, they're taking pause, looking around, feeling, observing, receiving. And I wondered how this book was going to land because our world is so worried right now. Would people think it's a silly, frilly idea? No. So the takeaway from this book to me is that wonder, especially awe, is not only ours by birthright, but it is life force. And I can promise you, when you were a kid, the proverbial you, anybody out there, including Rachel and me, we probably were playing in a sandbox in a public park someplace. And you know how kids they just jump into each other's arms. They want to go play. Let's go play. Let's go swing. Let's play in the sandbox. They're not sitting around thinking, I'm not creative. I don't have a voice. They're not looking at a watch that tells them how many steps they've taken that day. They just want to play. And even if they've endured abuse, especially they want to play. I want us to get back to the sandbox. If there's one thing you walk away with after reading The Wild Why, it's I want you to get back to the sandbox. What you already know that's in you, you've just potentially forgotten.
Incredible. What are some of the symptoms or internal feelings, experiences that one might feel when they're lacking wonder, curiosity plus awe? Or maybe from your own experience, was there a buildup of experiences or internal wrestling that led you to be like, oh man, I'm really missing this?
Well, The book begins with my fourth grade journal, which was the last pink thing I owned. It was pink patent leather with the word private on it that I got at a store that was huge in our little town. It was like the stationery store called Helanders. And it was full of mom and pop shops back then, Lake Forest, Illinois. And I have this for my fourth grade journal, Rachel, and this breaks my heart. In fourth grade, I think you're 9 years old, straight out of my journal. I talk too much. I ask too many questions. I cry too easily. I laugh too loud. I'm too sensitive. I'm not sure what that means. And I feel bad about all of it. I'll read it again quickly. I talk too much. I ask too many questions. I cry too easily. I laugh too loud. I'm too sensitive. I'm not sure what that means. And I feel bad about all of it. Laura Munson, fourth grade journal. So, where does this wound start? It can start in early childhood because did I really talk too much? Did I really laugh too loud? Was I really too sensitive? These are things that probably one person said to me, an elder, a contemporary, another child. Is it true? No. That was just somebody else's measuring stick, and I believed it. And I think that's what happens, that we all have a wound on some level when it comes to our self-expression. And many of us are very sensitive people, feeling things all the time, full of empathy, sometimes to a fault. We don't necessarily have a filter. We take everything in. And for those kids to have one person say one thing like that, you talk too much. That's something that we might believe and feel shame about and engrave into our minds and hearts and even souls for the rest of our lives. And I want us to become aware of those wounds, and I want us to tell a new story. What is the truth? Can you sell it? Maybe you do talk a lot. I talk a lot. That wound is still alive in me right now as I'm answering these questions, and I realize I'm answering them at length because we have a spacious amount of time. If this was a 5-minute interview, I would be answering in like quick little blips. But I love having room to express myself, and yet I still have that wound. I'm talking too much. I need to wrap up my answer. Stop talking. And that is simply something that I habituated, and I co-create with that habituation. And it's time to stop it. It's time to tune in to how our thought patterns serve us and sabotage us. And all too often, it's the latter. So I hope in this book that people will become aware of how they speak to themselves in their own mind. Most of us wouldn't speak to our worst enemies the way we speak to ourselves in our own minds. And in fact, that's what my memoir, This Is Not the Story You Think It Is, A Season of Unlikely Happiness, is really about. It's about finding emotional liberation during times of great conflict and pain. I don't know if that answered your question. I
It,
meandered. I talked too much. Oh, there's the wound. Oh, well. If you tune into what your intention is, that's what matters. Maybe the words that spill out in a clumsy way or a clunky way or a long way. So what? Express yourself. Give yourself permission to be exactly who you are and find ease. That's what I want for people.
oh, that brings me so many different directions. One word that keeps coming to mind is perfectionism. I have been wrapped up in perfectionism for a long time, especially as a collegiate athlete. Always expected to perform, look perfect, sound perfect, play perfect, all the things. It's very restrictive and does not allow self expression.
No, I lead these writing retreats, which we can talk about later, but I've worked with over 1,000 people, and I have 3 gymnasts who were Olympiads who've done my retreat, Haven Writing Retreats, and I've heard a lot about perfectionism. It's like for a long time, I used to think I had to be perfect as a writer, and that was that ambition addiction I had for a long time. And I finally like put down the sword. And that's when the real writing came out. That's when the heart language really came out. And so, in helping people with their self-expression, at least at Haven, and in the various workshops I do, some for writers and some others just for self-connection and self-expression, I say to people on the first night, I invite you to step outside of the societal constructs of good and bad. And I don't mean ethically, but I mean like good writer, bad writer, good athlete, bad athlete. I invite you to step outside of the constructs of good, bad, right, wrong, grade at the end, GPA, and the mother of them all, perfection, and take a free fall into the free zone that is Haven. And I will be holding the net, I promise. And in over 1,000 people, I've never once dropped it. And I feel such a collective sigh when I offer that invitation because so many people struggle with perfectionism and the pain it causes. When I say drop the sword, it doesn't mean don't strive.
Mhm.
But here's where I'll leave this one. For a long time, I wore the I am a writer story and reality like a badge. And it often set me apart, and I liked that. That's how I set this up at the beginning of this session. That I was sort of a rebel. I pushed back. I did things differently, but that didn't mean that it felt good. And it occurred to me one day that I was wearing I am a writer as a badge to keep people away, like a sword. And when I finally put that one down and said, I am a human, writing is of me,
Mm.
but it is not me, then everything changed for me.
So frequently, we talk about labels in conversations that I've had with many people. And at first, I shunned labels because I think that they can be really restrictive for that reason when we identify too strongly with something, being an athlete, being a writer. And I've tried to change my mindset and be in relationship with them and understand how a label can serve us. But I love the reframe you just used with your experience as being of writing. Is that how you said it?
I am a writer. It is of me, but it's not me.
Yes.
Identity, belonging, these two things are what people just long for. But if we let society define who we are, now we're not self-defining. And now we're under the thumb of what other people think of us. And that does not work.
I wrote down one of the quotes from your book, and that was somehow you've allowed yourself to be completely defined by everyone but you. How can you let go of everyone else's version of what your truth is and what's best for you and find your own? And that was a moment where I took a breath, soaked it in, and thought about it because I've been there. I've let people define me, choose for me. What do you say to people who are in this hamster wheel of adopting definitions from other people and are having a hard time stepping out of that?
I know this sounds, no, I'm not going to qualify it. Get back to the sandbox. I'm telling you, the little kid in you didn't have that story. And it's not that we can stay in the sandbox all our lives, right? And we can't all run around doing what we want to do all the time either. We have bills to pay and hopefully you love your job and hopefully you love your course of study or wherever you are in your life. But I think, look, all right, there's a poet and if you don't know her, you will now. And her name is Naomi Shihab Nye. And she's one of my very favorite poets. I learned about her from a Haven Writing Retreat alum. And now Naomi and I are friends. I reached out to her because I read one of her poems on every retreat. And she lives in San Antonio. And she's also a teacher and leads retreats. And she was my conversation partner for my event for the Wild Y in San Antonio. And we went out afterwards. We just had so much fun, immediate kindred spirit. And she said something that blew me away. And she's been through a lot. Her son died. I mean, we've all been through a lot. This beautiful and heartbreaking thing called life is, as my grandmother would say, it ain't for sissies, which is her way of playing it down, and that was her humor, the one that was friends with your great grandmother. And Naomi said to me at dinner, no big things, Laura, no big things, just tiny things,
Mm.
tiny things. And I really took that to heart because that is like the pendulum swing from the big ambition, brass ring in your hand. I want this, I want this. And I think it's really common for athletes to be sold that you should be reaching for the brass ring, literally. Like if you're running a marathon or running whatever, doing track, like gotta grab the baton, or I'm not very athletic at all, I have to admit. So like when my son tried out for baseball. I said, "How did auditions go?" It's like, "Mom, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm not into theater." I was a theater major, but I loved when Naomi said that at dinner. No big things, because that's how we live our life. It's little thing by little thing. And if we can really use that as a true practice, not as this sort of, oh, now I'm going to go watch birds. It's like, why can't we always be watching for birds? Why aren't we sitting on park benches? Why are we looking at our phones all the time? I mean, just standing in line, I was at the grocery store and we've got lots of tourists here in Whitefish because we live near Glacier National Park and it's summertime. And, so there was a long line at our little local corner convenience store. And everybody was on just looking at their phone. Like, God forbid you turn to the person to your left in line and be like, "Hey, what are you doing today? Like, are you here for the summer? Or are you here as a tourist? Or do you live here?" Just the way it used to be. I liked talking to people in checkout lines. And I find that in small town America, we do it more than we do um, in cities and stuff. And understandably so. You can't take everything in all the time. And sometimes you do kind of feel like you need to look at your phone because maybe somebody needs to contact you. But I just think there's something to be said about what Naomi said. No big things. Like just, and what you said at the beginning of this, Rachel, like just notice what's around you right now. My friend who also loves Naomi's poetry, she and I text each other, and it's often because we used to write letters, now we text. And we do this thing where we just write about like exactly what's going on in the moment. And she wrote she wrote in her text yesterday, "I'm sitting in my garden. My right eye is dry." The geraniums are as bright a pink as any pink I've ever seen. There's a slug in the moss. This is not silly. This is wonder. And this is, again, life force. We live our life in moments, moment by moment. So let's honor that and learn from them and make room for them, which means we need to stop.
There was a period of time in my life where I was really lacking joy. And I was like, oh man, what is it? What's missing? How am I to be happy again? I was kind of moving through the world on autopilot. I remember starting to meditate. And after a couple of months, even of meditating, I walked outside, just my normal route to the subway. Actually, I was living in London at the time, so to the tube. And I smelled a flower. And I realized I hadn't smelled a flower just by walking around in so long. Like, usually people would be like, "Oh, do you smell that?" And I would always be like, "No, like, how, what? My smell is terrible." And in that moment, I felt so much joy. And I realized that joy was the present moment through smelling a flower. So I just could not agree with you more. The importance of noticing, being in awe of all the sensations around us. And in addition to that, you talk about the lack of communication that we have walking through the world as well. I think in general, we've lost some bits of connection with ourself, with each other, with the spirit, with nature. It's really sad because I think there's a lot to be found there. And I hope that people will take this to heart and just stop and notice and start to send friends these little slugs in their garden as well.
I just love that. My right eye is dry.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I tuned in. I was like, my right eye is dry too. It's, but this is again, like, I know there are probably listeners out there saying, "Good for you all." But I'm a single mom. I got 3 kids at home. I got 2 jobs. I can't pay my mortgage this month. Whatever it is that is weighing on us, I promise you that, especially if you have so much on your shoulders, you need to slow down, even if just for a few breaths, because that is how you're going to stay self-connected, self-compassionate, stop beating yourself to the next thing. Go, 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 go. Come on, you got to go. I suffer from this. I mean, I wrote about this, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, I say in the book, like, look, I'm not an expert. on this. I don't have letters after my name. I'm not a wonderologist, but we all are wonderologists.
Yeah.
But I one time noticed that it's not one time, I do this a lot where I'll just because I run my own business and I have like three different jobs within that business. And I raised my kids for the last years as a single mother. So every so often I just get going so fast. And I'm capable of going really fast. That's the thing. I'm capable of being like a super achiever. And there's a side of me that is still pushing myself in that way, that perfectionism you were talking about. And I said out loud not long ago, all right, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best, okay? Leave me alone. And then I stopped and I'm like, who am I talking to? Who am I talking to? Who am I talking to right now? Leave me alone. I'm doing my best, okay? Oh, and then I said, you try. You try. Who am I talking to? And I hope there's somebody out there nodding instead of thinking I need to get some serious help psychologically. But do you catch yourself? I'm not asking you, Rachel, but like listeners, just know you're not alone. But maybe put the whip down. Does it really help you to be chasing yourself like that, dogging yourself so that you out loud, alone in a room, say, I'm doing the best I can. You try. What if we were kind to ourselves? Sweetheart, you're working so hard. Your life could sustain a moment to have a cup of tea and sit down and breathe and stare at the slug in the moss on your garden pathway. What would happen? Would the sky fall? Would you lose your job because you did that? No. In fact, you would be better off because you did that. So I'm trying to move personally and through this book into a place of self-compassion, kindness, ease. Not that life is easy. We die at the end of this thing. We're mortal. This is a beautiful and heartbreaking thing, this mortal life. Why not find ease? What's wrong with that? Nothing. Nothing.
You talk about this wonder wound so frequently in the book, and I recognize that a lot of what you were quoting earlier, I talk too much, I'm too loud, or some of those quotes you were using from your fourth grade journal are part of that whole wonder wound. And one part of the book that was just, again, a highlight is that recently when people share their stories or are speaking to someone, they say, enough about me, how about you? I've said that so many times. Enough about me, how about you? It's like this deflection to not want to share our story and who we are. Is that what your experience was?
Yeah, this is a really great one and really important. So thanks for pointing it out, Rachel. Now that the book's been out for a year and a half, I've heard from a lot of readers and also been in lots of situations where I've been on a stage and taking questions, Q&A. And that's probably the number one thing people hit on because toward the third section of the book, there's a section wherein this friend of mine who had a big, huge job as a producer in New York City for a show on CNN that everybody has heard of. And she decided to take a hiatus and go across the country and interview regular folks because her job was to book people that had achieved a whole lot. And she was fascinated by the every human. And so she set off on a road trip across the country and interviewed people. And she chose to meet with me. And we had become friends. It's a longer story and it's in the book. But she said, bring your guitar, bring an open heart, bring your journal, and let's sit together all day long and really answer the question, how are you? And that's in part what inspired Willis Grove, actually, because that's what these women do. They come to Montana, four women at huge crossroads moments in their lives, pretending they're fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. How are you in the grocery store buying broccoli? I'm fine. How are you? Enough about me. How are your kids? Let's tell me all about your kids' soccer stats. Like enough about me. I think that just comes from fear. And also sometimes we don't owe everybody our whole story, right? Like buying broccoli and somebody says, how are you? You don't need to say, I'm not great. My mom just died and I'm in grief and it seems to attack at will. And therefore, right now, I'm going to apologize because I may start crying. If anybody out there is in grief like that, like I'm in that right now, it's weird the stuff that comes out of your mouth. But that's in part why we say enough about me or I'm fine or what about you or all that. It's discomfort. But it's so important to carve out time with somebody who's safe and really share about how you are and to create enough time so that you can share and then that person can share. And so when I say, it's funny, like when I say this in various suburbs or cities where people are going fast all the time, when I've been promoting the Wild Why, I'll say, do you have 2 hours? And I don't say it like, do you have 2 hours? As a joke, like, oh, how am I? Do you have 2 hours? And usually everybody laughs. Like, no, who has 2 hours? Of course you have 2 hours if you prioritize speaking your truth. And it requires finding somebody who is safe. I mean, actually, just last night, I hung out with a friend for 4 hours around her fire pit in Montana. And that's what we did. We answered the question, how are you? And gave each other a long time to answer. And we knew it was going to be reciprocal. This is so important. So that chapter in the book is called The Tiger in the Room. It's in part 3 on page 247. And we spend an entire day together at this bar and then later at this hotel. And it was in Livingston, Montana, which is not far from where you grew up. And we just talked about how we really were at the time. That is luxurious and seems like an impossibility for so many people. Why? We need to make room. But again, you don't owe your story to everyone. It's important to find somebody who really wants to be equal in that and to make the time. And maybe it's a whole weekend. Maybe you get one day and they get the next day. To me, this is another life force affirming and necessary exercise. How are you? Do you have 2 hours? Because I'd love to really share.
I wonder if it's the case because how are you? The question is so overused in that I can tell a distinct difference when someone walks up to me and is like, how are you? Versus how are you? With genuine intention of wanting to listen and to know. And I wonder if it's because we just use it so frequently as like a passing phrase that no one takes it seriously.
I had a foreign exchange student live with us when my kids were in middle school and high school from Sweden. And she spoke English perfectly, but she was trying to understand our culture. And again, mind you, this is in small town Montana. This is not on the Upper East Side in New York City and or wherever. And it's slow paced here. But she came home and she said, Laura, when people say, how are you here, do they want an answer? And I said, give me an example. And she said, well, I was at the grocery store, actually the same grocery store I was just talking about. And she said, we only have a few. And she said, I was just buying whatever I was buying. And the cashier said, hi, how are you? That'll be $15. Am I supposed to answer how I am? And I said, wow, that is such an interesting insight into our culture. And I think it's exactly what you just said, Rachel. We use it as a like a fill-in phrase.
Mhm.
And there's a big difference between, hi, how are you? That'll be $15. And how are you? I wish we had a different way of saying, I'd try not to say, how are you? Unless I mean it. It's
Mhm.
nice to see you. Or beautiful day we're having.
It reminds me, I'm currently in grad school at Columbia. So frequently we're asked questions in class. And I know that, kids are asked questions throughout all of schooling, but just that grocery example of them being like, how are you? That's $15. It makes me think of a teacher asks a question. It's like, anyone have questions? And then just moves on. There's sometimes just a lack of silence or space. And I wouldn't say that I have professors that do that, but in taking classes that are centered around how we can enhance education, especially in youth, that is often talked about. Silence is powerful and giving
Oh,
people
yes.
space.
Yeah. The other one that I don't like is, I'm somebody who loves words, so I pay attention to how people use them. When people could say, does that make sense? Anyway, blah, blah, blah. They use, does that make sense as a pause phrase? And I always say, I interrupt before they go on and I say, yes, thank you. That does make sense. Or no, actually, that doesn't make sense. Could you help me understand what you mean? That's the other one. Do you know what I mean? Blah, 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 blah. So they're just habituated little kind of fill-in phrases. But It's confusing. I just thought that was such a great insight from somebody from a different culture. Are we supposed to answer? Does that make sense? Anyway, blah, 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 blah. It's like, wait a minute. Did you ask a question or not? But you're right to be like, it's a challenge. Try it. I mean, you're good at it, I think. I'm good at it. I've learned it. I mean, not like right now, I'm not going to have a big, huge pause, but when I'm sitting with a client on one of my retreats in our one-on-one, I do a lot of silent observing. And while I want to fill in blanks because I do like to talk and I like to be insightful, I've learned it's much more important to allow the space for them to be witnessed
Yes.
in a safe way. It's an overused phrase in the world of leading retreats, but to hold the space for somebody to be exactly where they are in that moment, that requires silence sometimes. And that can be scary for people.
Absolutely. It can be very uncomfortable. I want to ask you a question related to this season of grief that you're in. And my heart goes out to you and your family, your mom named Gigi. Is that right?
Uh, well, yes, she was Virginia, and then her nickname was Ginny, and then her grandmother name was Gigi.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, Jenny. And in this season of grief, I'm curious what it looks like to love yourself and care for yourself because you mentioned the importance of that a lot in the book. And I'd love for you to answer that if you feel comfortable, almost as a way to give people permission to recognize what loving themselves can look like in different seasons.
Yeah, beautiful question. And listen, like I said, I'm not always good at this. I've worked hard to try to be aware of the way my thought patterns serve me and sabotage me. But my dad died in 2004, and he and I were really close. He was kind of my person. And I love my mom, and my mom loved me. But my dad and I had something really special. And when he died, it just about almost took me down. And my son was 4 years old, my daughter was 8. And I called a friend, and listen, call a trusted friend. When you're going through a hard time, you do not have to suffer alone. Ultimately, it is kind of an inside job, but it's really important to share how you're doing, especially if you're not doing well. And I wasn't doing well, and I called him, and he's an author. I'm not going to say who it is, not that you're asking, but he's just an incredible author and insightful human being and was my mentor for many years. And he said, "You've just lived in the ICU for a month with your father, helping him live and helping him die in the ICU." And I had the night shift. So it was standing there. He would take off his oxygen mask. I would put it back on. He would take it off. I would put it back on all night long because the nurses said, this is not our job. He would need a professional caregiver to do that job. It's an ICU. They're dealing with so much people living and dying and fighting for their life. And so I took that job at night, and my mother and sister took that job during the day for a month. And when I came back to Montana, everything looked different. Just like anytime you've been in a hospital and you come back or been in any kind of situation that's dark for you, to come back into the world, everything's like technicolor and the sun is really bright and it's like you just want to get in bed and put at least I did, the covers over my head. And I called this friend, and I remember I was sitting on my front porch, just kind of in shock. And he said, "Laura, go slowly and be careful." And I think when he said careful, he didn't mean necessarily protective. I think he meant full of care, like wonderful, two L's. Go slowly and be careful because you've just been incredibly open and hyper laser focused in trying to keep your father alive and then help him die well. Go slowly, be careful. And that's actually the advice that I give on the last night at Haven, because a good retreat should unbraid you a little, not have you come undone, and then put you back together again in a new way so you can go back into the world new. That's what a good retreat should do. And that's what Haven does. It's not about me, it's about the retreat. So I can talk about it like this. So I tell them the last night, look, you're very open right now. You're new. The poet Emma Mellon, she's a physician who lives just outside of Philadelphia. She's quoted in The Wild Why. And one of the lines from her poem, I forget the name of the poem right now. It might be Kindness. is allow yourself to be spelled differently. Allow yourself to be spelled differently. And if you step into that allowing, often on a retreat, that's a perfect place for that. It's outside of the rigor and responsibilities of your daily life. That's when that newness can happen. So when you go back into the world, don't just go leaping in. You're you're spelled differently right now. And it might require going slowly and being careful.
Mm.
And this is something that I can't stress enough. I don't mean to say your life depends on it, but when you're in severe grief, like I was after my dad died, I needed that advice to just slow down. If you've got a big, huge mound of clean laundry on your laundry room floor, Mount Saint Laundry, just do the socks. If your dishwasher is clean, just do the top drawer. Go slowly, be careful. This is a form of self-love, and there's no time like grief to require this of us. Grief, I have found, takes you by the shoulders and shakes you and says, I'm not going to go away. And it can sort of attack like a monster at will. My mother lived a very, very rich life all the way to 93. And she was playing bridge. She loved to play bridge and needlepoint. And she was a real go-getter, doing all the things she loved to do all the way to pretty much the end. And so it was a really graceful death. And dad was 86 when he died. And it was also a graceful death. So these were not trauma deaths, but still to lose a parent it's a big time in your life to go slowly, be careful, be mindful, go with ease, go with self-kindness and compassion, go with earnestness and wonder and stop when you can. That's my goal for it's 4th of July weekend. And I love 4th of July. My parents loved 4th of July. And I'm going to go way up to the North Fork of the Flathead River, way, way up in Glacier, off the grid, stay in a little cabin, bring my guitar and my journal and my puppy and go slowly and be careful because I know to take this seriously. It is just like wonder, not a silly, frilly idea, but life force.
I loved reading about what you were saying about your father in the book. Someone who set your wonder free is what you said about your father, which I thought was really beautiful. Within all of this, you mentioned Naomi and a few other poets and writers that influenced you. I think there was also someone named Jim Harrison. Am I getting that right?
Oh, yes, you
Okay.
are. I've
Well,
got a picture of him right here.
oh.
He was my literary hero starting at age 18, and by the end of his life, my friend.
I loved reading the story of you reaching out to him and first meeting him. The reason that I want to bring him up is because it relates to this topic around putting other people on a pedestal, especially when you look up to them or they're your literary hero. And you wrote in the book, having the courage to reach past my hero worship taught me to stop giving away my power to those I admired and to see that they are as human as I am. Tell us more about this quote, Jim Harrison, if you want, and what it took to take your power back.
There's only one place to go when you're on a pedestal, and that is off. Clay feet. If somebody puts us on a pedestal, we're going to end up on the ground, which is why I'm really careful on my retreats. I'm in the circle too. On the page, I'm the same way. It's like, maybe I'm braver than you, but not by much. I think that's actually in the wild why. Like, I'll hold the torch. Let's go into this forest that is dark, and I know that there are grizzly bears there because I live in Montana, but I know my way through, and I'll hold the light. And I've got a backpack with bear spray and Cliff Bars and water and all that, but I'm going to take your hand. I'll be the guide. But again, I might be a little braver than you just because I've been through those woods and I know there's beauty in there, treasure. I'll lead the way, but I'm also feeling a lot of the same things you're feeling. That's how I lead the retreats too, and how I try to show up on the page. And so when you put somebody on a pedestal, and there's several writers that I've done that with in my life. Terry Tempest Williams is the other one, and she's also written about in the book. I consider her a dear soul sister. And if you go on my website, lauramunson.com, you'll see in the event section, I believe, an interview when Willis Grove came out. It was March 2020. So I got about 14 events in before COVID hit, and it was time to pack everything up. 38 events I had to cancel and workshops and go back home like everybody else. We all have our COVID story. But Terry did an online interview with me, and you see me, and I look like a little girl, like meeting her hero. My smile is just literally from ear to ear. I've got tears in my eyes the whole time. And we're just human beings. That's it. But maybe we do have something to impart, some sort of wisdom or leadership to somebody. And when I finally met, I'm looking at a picture of us right now. So, but when I finally met him, you know, I realized here we were in this little teeny town called Patagonia, Arizona. And there's like one bar in town, the Wagon Wheel, and we met there. I finally wrote him a letter because it wasn't that I wanted something from him anymore. I have like 25 letters that I never sent to him because they all were just this wanting, kind of greedy, kind of like vindicate me, tell me who I am, promise me something, just that yucky, greedy feeling that you get when, like I used to get it a lot when I would go to writing conferences and there would be an author on the stage or an agent or an editor, like, help me, see me, get me published. And especially living here, I took myself out of the race. And so those opportunities were few and far between. And I had little kids at the time too. And when I finally met some of these people, I realized that they're just people like me who sit at the intersection of heart and mind and craft that is the writing life. And most of us aren't asked to do it.
Mhm.
And so I realized that by putting somebody on a pedestal, you're essentially allowing something outside of who you are to define who you are. If they like me, if they accept me, then I must be okay. And that's an insane way to live your life. When you base your happiness on things outside of your control, things or people, that is truly insanity. And I have learned that the hard way. And when I finally met these people, it was like, oh, they're just people like me. And it actually really made everything a lot easier. We have to define who we are from the inside out, not from the outside in. And that took me a while to learn.
Such a good reminder. And I think that's one of the reasons after reading that in your book that made me feel so comfortable just to show up today and meet you, even though we hadn't spoken on the phone or anything, because I recognized that you make it clear to other people in your life, no matter of status, that we are all one and the same. We're all equal in our ways. Maybe there's extra bravery in different areas, but I think that's a really important reminder as we move through the world to keep our own confidence up as well. Because I think as soon as I put people or idealize people in my life, it's almost like, well, I'm enough too. Even if I don't have the accolades or the letters by my name or whatever it might be. So I appreciate you saying that. I want to ask one question about rejection, which I know you faced so many times. The rejections when you were trying to get things published all along the way. What would you say to anyone who's feeling rejected constantly, beating their head against a wall and not breaking through, but they love what they're doing?
Well, I would say this is like one of the top defining scenes in my life, and it's in this book. And I tell this story at Haven as well. It's so important, everybody. This success myth that we strive for, this feeling of failure when we can't get where we want to strive, it's a myth. Success by society's constructs is a myth, which means failure is too. And the only thing we can control is doing the work, whatever that means to us, doing the work. And that's good news because you can control that. The context was I was on my way to my first book signing, New York City, the Barnes and Noble on, I think, Madison. I forget where it is, but it's on the Upper East Side. I was in a limo. It was, like the top guns of the bastions of New York publishing that had rejected me for years just because of that little modern love essay that I'd written. The book, This Is Not the Story You Think It Is, was already written. I already had an excellent literary agent named Beth Davy. one of the tippy top, and I'm in this limo. And it was funny because it was a Suburban, and it's like, really, a Suburban in Manhattan, like where I live, like I haul horses. I need a Suburban, but not, really Manhattan. And we're crawling up, in traffic, and it's all of these top editors, top publicity people, and we're going to my first reading. And I looked out the window, and the story is in the book, and I literally saw the 16-year-old version of me and my boyfriend at the time. And I'm just going, blah, 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 blah. Someday I'm going to be a famous actress. Because that was always what I wanted to be. I was, like I said, a theater major. I found writing at the very end of college. And I mean, I'd already always been doing it, but I never wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an actress and then maybe write my own films and be an auteur and, small ego. That's the 20-year-olds. It's good when you have a big ego when you're 20 because it takes a lot of guts to matriculate into this world. And I just saw this younger version of me being like, someday I'm going to have my name in lights and blah, blah, blah. And my poor boyfriend at the time was just sort of nodding his head. And I had this huge epiphany that here I was. Finally, I got that brass ring. Finally. Only it was just a little different, but it was still like that perfection, that striving, that wanting, that societally deemed you arrived. And I thought, wow, man, I don't feel anything. Like there's no there, just like Gertrude Stein said, but she was talking about Oakland, California. But it was like, I don't feel anything. I feel gratitude that this amazing team has stepped in and supported a book that we weren't even going to go out with because I didn't have a platform at the time. But outside of grateful and excited and nervous, because I'm about to go on a 2-month cross-country book tour, I just like didn't feel the way I thought I would feel. There was nothing there in terms of the success achieved. So I turned to the head of marketing for Penguin, now Penguin and Random House, like the doyen of New York publishing, marketing, and publicity. And I said, I just had a massive epiphany. I don't really believe there's such a thing as success by society's constructs. I think personally that's different, which means I don't think there's any truth in failure
Mm.
by society's constructs. And the good news is I can write regardless of rejection or acceptance. And that's within my control. It was just like 30 years of stress just like rolled off my shoulders, and her shoulders kind of went down because I was about to go on Good Morning America and do all this stuff, and the Oprah show had called and we said that's a longer story, but they wanted to see if I was worth it. I hadn't proven myself yet. A lot of writers come undone on the tour because a lot of writers are not very extroverted. I happen to be pretty extroverted, and I like having a mic in my hand, and I like being on a stage, and I like having a good message and sharing it with people. And I said, I hope that you tell your other authors that. And I swear, everybody in the whole limo, like their shoulders all just dropped, like, good, grounded, honest truth.
Mm.
But would I have listened to that when I was 16, 17, 18, all the way? I was 45. I'll be 60 this summer. I was 45 when I had that epiphany. And I think my reaction would have been in my younger years, good for you. You got the big advance, you got the big red carpet, so you can say that now.
Yeah.
But then in that moment, I finally got that thing I wanted, and there was nothing there. And I just want to say to anyone out there that I learned that lesson because of something I achieved that would be called societal success. But I would hope that I would have learned that anyway. And if I can help anybody out there who is reaching and reaching and striving for that success and getting knocked around with rejection, you just have to stop for a minute and say, is this worth it? Am I basing my happiness on things outside of my control? You can do your best, and please do, but don't do it because you think that you're owed anything or that the world will reward you for it. Do it because you have to do it. Do it because you love it, even when it's a bloody risk, even when it breaks your heart. Don't let it take you down, though. Let's try to change that tortured artist paradigm or that tortured person paradigm. Your successes might be surprises along the way. And can we call it a success if we sit there looking at a butterfly, one bird, In Willa's Grove, Willa challenges that same character, Jane. Why don't you go outside and try to track one bird and follow it around for as long as you can, for as long as it'll let you. I promise you, you can find the time to do something simple and stretch it and really know what it is to be in the present moment, to truly be in it. And that will hold you together,
Inspiring.
especially in times of rejection.
Yeah, absolutely. Two of the biggest things I've taken away from today are to slow down and to be in awe, which I don't think we put enough importance on. Laura, I thank you just for showing up as your wonderful self and for your writing. I'm excited to read your other two books, and I hope everyone else will go out and do the same. I want to give you the chance to just share about your writing workshops and what you're doing in the world and where people can connect with you. Anything else you might want to say. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rachel. Well, I've shared a bit about my other published books and my writing retreats. You can go to lauramunson.com and learn about my online writing community. Not everybody has it within them to get out here to Montana to do one of my Haven writing retreats. I lead about 7 a year, and they meet you where you need to be met, anywhere along your writing path. So some people who come are working on books. I've been working with them prior as their editor. I am a developmental editor. I've helped lots of people write and publish books. Anybody who promises you that they can get you published, run for the hills, because even a best-selling author can't know for sure if her next book is going to be published. But I give my level best to my clients where appropriate and with good boundaries. I only work with people who come to Haven or who are signed up for it or are alums, of which there are over 1,000. So some people haven't ever written anything since childhood, but they love it. They know that writing is their way and they need to move their pen. Maybe they used to journal and they stopped because they would swirl in the vortex of woe. And some people have always wanted to write a book, but life took over as it does. And they know it's like the writing's got them by their shoulders, like, write me, wake up. You've got a book in you and it needs to come through you. So lots of different kinds of people at lots of different places in their writing path come to Haven. If you are interested in those, I do have room on both of my September retreats this year, which is 2026, and then also my October retreat. Just a few spots on each of them. It requires getting in touch with me, Laura at lauramunson.com. That's also the contact info on my website. And then we get on the phone and we dig in and we talk. It's an hour-long conversation. I listen to you. You get to be listened to about your writing dreams. And then we talk about how we can tailor make the retreat for you. Because even though everybody's doing the same retreat, they're all doing it a little bit differently. It's the only retreat that I know that's led by a best-selling author who's also a professional editor and who has worked with so many people and can continue to support you long after the retreat. That said, not everybody can come to Montana, and that's why I have an online writing community called Haven Nest, and you can learn more about that. The enrollment is closed right now, but it's going to open again. There are 72 cycles in the archives. I've been doing it for 4 years. They include expert calls, which are 90-minute calls with an incredible industry person, whether it's an author or an editor or a publisher, etc. Each cycle also includes a lesson, and they're meaty with a coinciding writing prompt. And then also the next week, there is a workshop where I pick one of the submissions from the lesson prompt, and then I do a live workshop. Again, this is all in the archives. And then we also have a live social hour wherein we write once a month. So there's so much there for people, and we're trying something new. We have about just under 100 people in the community, but we're gonna mix it up a little bit. So I think we're gonna bring the pricing way down because we want even more interaction. The community piece is really important to me and to writers. So you don't have to do it alone. Writing is done in solitude, but it is born out of community, and that comes straight from Terry Tempest Williams. We write in a solitude born of community. And finally, Substack, Wonderings with Laura Munson. I try to put one out once a week or maybe twice a week, and you can learn a whole lot more about the stuff I'm up to over there on my website. So thanks, Rachel. Thanks for giving me that. I'm trying to help.
I can see that.
And anybody who's a listener to your beautiful, Unmasked, a Beyond Worthy podcast, come on, that's a great title. I think you should write a book called Unmasked, a Beyond Worthy book.
That's coming next. Oh,
Anybody who's a listener of yours would be probably a great match for the work I do.
oh, that's great. Laura, thank you again. I just appreciate you carving out your time. I know it's precious and it's been such a joy.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks to everyone out there listening. Go find Laura. It's clear that your work is amazing and in service of the world. So, thanks everyone for being here. This is Unmasked, and we'll catch everyone next time.